families, especially women and children. Number two, because of this budget, Texas will lose jobs today, and worst of all, it is going to put us in a weaker position to compete for jobs in the future because of a less educated and less skilled workforce. Finally, this legislature had other options. We had other choices that we could have made, but the legislature failed to have the courage to do what's right for all of Texas. The budget cuts will have a disproportionate impact on women. There will be millions of women harmed by this budget. Here is one woman's story, as she wrote in a letter to me. My name is Danielle Hernandez. I reside in San Antonio, Texas. I'm a single mom, an employee, and a full-time college student. I attend Our Lady of the Lake, where I am pursuing my teaching degree in special education. I'm going to school in order to provide a better life for my son. I'm aware that tuition equalization grant funding and teach grant funding for families, especially women and children. Number two, because of this budget, Texas will lose jobs today, and families, especially women and children. Number two, because of this budget, Texas will lose jobs today, and worst of all, it is going to put us in a weaker position to compete for jobs in the future because of a less educated and less skilled workforce. Finally, this legislature had other options. We had other choices that we could have made, but the legislature failed to have the courage to do what's right for all of Texas. The budget cuts will have a disproportionate impact on women. There will be millions of women harmed by this budget. Here is one woman's story, as she wrote in a letter to me. My name is Danielle Hernandez. I reside in San Antonio, Texas. I'm a single mom, an employee, and a full-time college student. I attend Our Lady of the Lake, where I am pursuing my teaching degree in special education. I'm going to school in order to provide a better life for my son. I'm aware that tuition equalization grant funding and teach grant funding may be decreased or eliminated. If there is no funding available, then I cannot continue my college education. Please help me be the first person in my family to obtain a college degree. She goes on to write, my health has not been too good lately either, but I pushed myself to finish college in order to provide for my son with a more stable life. God bless. Danielle, I'm sorry to tell you that we did cut TEG and other state-funded college grants and scholarships. You may be one of the 43,000 Texans who will not receive help from the state to become a teacher. Even worse, this budget cuts education and thousands of jobs for teachers, which will make it harder for you to find employment once you do complete your college degree. Even worse still, the education your son is receiving, the quality of it will be harmed. With fewer teachers and more students, classrooms will obviously be more crowded. Please take care of your health as best as you can, because this legislature has also gutted women's health care and family planning services by 66%. When the House debated the budget in April, Republican legislators spent hours attacking women's health and family planning services. And the women of Texas now have to live with those cuts. Basic preventative health care that might have been there for you will not be there for you. Danielle, please take care. The legislature could have done more to protect innocent children from being hurt by this budget. Let me tell you a little story about a young lady named Kira. She is 3 years old. She lives in Burleson, Texas. Her grandfather called me. He loves her so much. He wanted to tell me about her pre-K program that allowed her to mainstream with other 3- and 4-year-olds. You see, little Kira is suffering from Down syndrome. She's living with Down syndrome. But this public pre-K program has meant a lot to her. It's allowed her to advance in her social skills and her learning. As it stood then, the district would be eliminating full-day pre-K for Kira and her classmates as a direct result of this legislature planning to eliminate public pre-K grants and, of course, cutting public education overall. Roger, if you're listening, I had hoped little Kira and thousands of others would be spared. Unfortunately, this legislature failed to act. They will lose their access to full-day pre-K. I wish we had used some of the rainy day fund for the next 2 years, or cut back on some of the corporate tax giveaways to help your granddaughter. This legislature felt differently. Please try to find a way to provide Kira the professional services she will need. As you know, if she does not receive them at an early age because of her condition, she will live a much harder life. The Brigidine Sisters of San Antonio wrote to me, begging me to stop health care cuts for the elderly and to understand that they are not statistics. They are real people. They told me a special story about one of their own, Sister Winifred, a woman who dedicated her whole life to caring for others. The sisters are very concerned for their Sister Winifred because their community is aging themselves. And if Sister Winifred loses her spot at the nursing home, they won't be able to take care of her properly and take her in. Sisters, if you're listening, we did make progress. However, I'm sorry to inform you that this budget leaves in place the cut to nursing homes that was implemented last year, and cuts in our overall healthcare budget are to the tune of 30%. Please prepare for the worst, sisters, because in 2013, our healthcare budget that makes payments to nursing homes and other healthcare providers runs out 4 months early. You see, this budget is hard on women in a lot of ways. If the state is not going to be there for vulnerable children and elderly, it will most likely be women who pick up the pieces, who will have to change their lives dramatically to step in. Carol Poor has an 83-year-old mother who lives in an Alzheimer's unit in Gunther, Texas. Carol said she would have to resign from her secretarial job to care for her mother if she were to be discharged. Neither of the women is able to pay for a nursing home or a home health care nurse. Here's another story. Janet Amacar-Yo in San Antonio. She has a 23-year-old son with severe autism who cannot communicate. Sometimes he's aggressive. He requires 24-hour care. If he loses his group home slot, she too will have to leave her job because she cannot afford to care for him and pay somebody else the professional services that he requires. She fears she'll be reliant on public assistance. Let's now talk about jobs. Make no mistake, this budget will impact all of us because it impacts our economy. The LBB, the keeper of the numbers that we rely on to estimate our price tags on every single budget and to tell us how the numbers add up, they did their own independent analysis and found that House Bill 1 earlier in the year would cause the state to lose 335,000 jobs, an increase in unemployment of 2%. Now, I know there's a lot of debate on this report, but here is one thing that we cannot debate, and that is those in control of state government should have seen this coming since 2007. In 2007, our budget shortfall was 8%. You might ask, how do you pass a budget with an 8% hole? Well, we used money from a prior budget cycle, a fund balance. The following budget cycle, when we got together in 2009, that hole nearly doubled in size to 14%. We were fortunate to have stimulus dollars to help us bridge this budget hole, or to fill this budget hole. Of course, in 2011, the hole again nearly doubled to 27%. How are we solving this now? Through a cuts-only and accounting tricks approach to the budget. My friends, we can do better. We have to do better than this. Texas cannot grow itself out of this problem. It cannot because our population is growing less educated. Our population is growing less educated because we are failing to educate them. It didn't have to be this way. The governor and the legislature made a choice to do this. They could have chosen to use some of the rainy day funds to pay for the next 2 years. They chose not to. They could have chosen to close tax loopholes and make all corporations pay their fair share. They chose not to. They could have chosen to fix our broken business tax. They chose not to. Instead, this legislature chose to balance the budget on the backs of vulnerable Texans and women.